Jared Wilson sat quietly at his desk, the soft hum of the office surrounding him, blending into the background like a familiar lull. For years, his life at Goldcraft Technologies had been one of invisibility, marked by menial tasks and an ever-growing sense of resignation. His role was sales, but the work he was assigned, making copies, running errands, filing, was a far cry from what he had been trained for. Jared had a law degree, but he had long buried that part of himself, content to blend into the gray fabric of office life. Today was different, though. The tension in the air was palpable. The $40 million deal with Summit Industrial, one of the company's largest clients, was to be finalized in a meeting later that afternoon. Jared's new boss, Karen Simmons, was leading the charge, and he couldn't help but notice the weight on her shoulders. She was strong, though competent, intelligent, and with a grace that Jared had never seen in any other manager. But there was something lurking beneath the surface, something Jared couldn't quite put his finger on. And that something had a name: William Hastings. William had once been the sales manager, Karen's predecessor, a man who reigned with authority and manipulation. Jared knew firsthand how William worked. He had been at the receiving end of the man's scorn for years, assigned pointless tasks to keep him from ever contributing meaningfully to the company's success. William had a way of making people feel small, and Jared had been no exception. It wasn't until Karen had arrived that Jared began to feel a glimmer of hope. She treated him with respect, handing him responsibilities he had never been trusted with before. For the first time in years, Jared found himself feeling useful. The problem was, William wasn't gone. Technically, he had been promoted to an executive role in a different department, but he had a vested interest in the deal Karen was about to close. Jared had seen the looks, the whispered conversations between William and the higher-ups. He knew something was coming. And Jared, ever the wallflower, was used to fading into the background, watching events unfold around him. But not today. Today, something inside him stirred. As he prepared documents for the meeting, a creeping realization settled in. William had deliberately sabotaged Karen. The files he had reviewed earlier were incomplete. Crucial documents, including contract amendments from a previous deal William had handled with Summit Industrial, were missing. If these weren't presented, Karen's ability to address the client's concerns would collapse, and William would undoubtedly swoop in to reclaim his former position at her expense. Jared swallowed hard, his fingers hovering over the keyboard as if frozen. Should he step in? For years he had been timid, afraid to speak up, afraid to act. The old scars of bullying, from both William's mistreatment and his youth, still held him back. Memories of being humiliated by his school bully, Mike, flashed through his mind. Mike had ridiculed him for writing stories, for being different. It was easier to remain invisible even now. But as he looked up and saw Karen moving through the office, her usual confident stride slower, more burdened than usual, something inside him shifted. No, not this time. The conference room was cold. The sleek, sterile environment didn't help the unease curling in Jared's stomach. Karen stood at the head of the long table, presenting with the same poised professionalism she always had. A dozen executives from Summit Industrial sat across from her, their faces unreadable, their silence almost oppressive. William sat in the corner, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth, watching with predatory interest. Jared's heart pounded as he clutched his briefcase under the table, filled with the documents Karen would need but didn't have yet. William's trap was waiting to spring. It didn't take long. 10 minutes into the presentation, Mark Davis, Summit Industrial's chief representative, raised his hand, his voice cool and calculated. Ms. Simmons, before we proceed, I'd like to address the unresolved issues from the last contract we had with your company. The equipment you supplied was not only delayed by 6 months, but it also didn't meet the specifications outlined in the original agreement. Karen blinked, momentarily thrown. She glanced down at her notes, then over to Jared, who gave her a small nod of reassurance, though she couldn't know what he was about to do. The room was silent. William shifted in his seat, a gleam of satisfaction in his eyes. Well? Mark pressed, folding his arms across his chest. We need answers before we can continue this negotiation. Karen fumbled through her notes again, clearly searching for documents that weren't there. Jared's pulse quickened. This was at the moment William had orchestrated to see her fail. Jared's chair scraped against the floor as he stood. All eyes turned to him, the quiet man no one ever noticed. He felt the weight of their gazes, the familiar sensation of panic creeping up his spine. But Karen's eyes, wide with desperation, were all the motivation he needed. Excuse me, Mr. Davis, Jared began, his voice steady, though his heart raced. Regarding the issues from the previous contract, we've reviewed all necessary documents, and I believe there's been a misunderstanding. William shifted again, his smirk faltering. Jared caught his eye, and for the first time, saw uncertainty there. Jared walked to the front of the room, retrieving a set of papers from his briefcase. "Here is the original contract," he said, laying it in front of Mark. The delays were caused by unforeseen circumstances on both sides. Additionally, the equipment specifications, though lower than requested, were within the agreed-upon ranges. The room buzzed with murmurs as Mark's team reviewed the documents. Jared continued, his confidence growing with each word. "We've already taken steps to rectify these issues, including significant upgrades to the equipment, which is now performing at optimal levels. I've included a full report on the repairs and the compensation measures taken." Karen stood still, her eyes fixed on Jared, her expression unreadable. The clients began to nod in agreement as they flipped through the documents, some even making calls to their teams to confirm the information. "Where did you get these?" Mark asked, his tone more curious now than accusatory. "I prepared them last night," Jared said simply. He didn't mention that William had hidden these papers or that the entire scenario had been a setup. As Mark conferred with his colleagues, Jared turned to face William. The older man's face was pale, his hands clenched into fists, but Jared wasn't finished. "And just for the record," Jared added, his voice gaining an edge, "this deal will be based on facts, not sabotage." William stood abruptly, the color draining from his face as he realized his scheme had failed. The executives of Goldcraft, who had been watching the exchange intently, now turned their attention to him. "What's going on here, William?" one of the senior executives demanded. Jared stepped back as the meeting erupted into murmurs. William fumbled for excuses, but it was too late. Karen, regaining her composure, took over the conversation and smoothly guided the negotiations to a close. The deal was secured. Later that evening, as the office slowly emptied, Karen found Jared at his desk, quietly packing up his things. The adrenaline from the meeting had faded, leaving him drained but satisfied. "Jared." Karen's voice was soft as she approached. "I can't believe what you did today. You saved the deal. But I have to ask, how did you know?" Jared looked down at his hands, unsure of how to begin. For so long, he had hidden his potential, buried it under layers of self-doubt and fear. But now, with Karen standing before him, her eyes full of gratitude, he realized that maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop hiding. "I wasn't always a sales clerk," he began slowly. "I have a law degree. Contracts, negotiations, these are things I used to be good at." Karen's eyes widened in surprise. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Jared shrugged, feeling the weight of his past pushing down on him. I used to be different. But people like William, they make you believe you're not worth anything more than what they give you. It's easier to stay quiet to avoid attention." Karen stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "Well, you're not quiet anymore, and I'm grateful for that." Jared looked up, meeting her gaze. There was a warmth there, a kindness he hadn't expected. For a moment, they stood in silence, the unspoken words between them hanging in the air. Then, Karen smiled. "Come on, let's get out of here. We've earned it." Jared had never seen his office building so quiet, especially not after the whirlwind of events that had taken place earlier in the day. As he walked beside Karen through the empty corridors, his mind whirred with thoughts about the meeting, about William, about the choices that had led him here. But more than anything, it was the feeling of finally stepping out of the shadows that lingered in his chest. Karen glanced over at him as they reached the elevators. "Are you sure you're okay with what happened today? I mean, that was a pretty big move you made, exposing William like that." Jared sighed, leaning against the cool metal of the elevator wall. "I didn't do it to hurt him, if that's what you mean. But I couldn't just sit there and watch him sabotage you. I've seen him do it too many times to others and to me." She gave him a thoughtful look as the elevator doors closed. "I can't believe he got away with it for so long. The executives trusted him, and I didn't see it coming." Jared hesitated for a moment. He's good at hiding it, manipulating people. It's like a game to him, one where he always makes sure the odds are in his favor. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line, anger flashing in her eyes. Well, it's over for him now. After today, I doubt he'll be able to weasel his way back into the company's good graces. Jared nodded, but there was a heaviness in the pit of his stomach. Even with William's downfall, he couldn't help but feel the weight of years spent living under the man's oppressive thumb. A part of him still feared retaliation, though he knew William's career at Goldcraft was effectively over. As the elevator descended, Karen broke the silence. "You know, Jared, I wish I had known you had a law background sooner. You've been wasting your talent here, doing work that's far beneath what you're capable of. Jared shifted uncomfortably, his instinct to downplay his abilities surfacing once again. I just didn't think it mattered. I mean, I wasn't hired for that kind of work. And honestly, after years of being pushed aside, you start to believe that's all you're good for. Karen turned to face him fully, her expression serious. You're worth more than that, Jared. I saw it today, and not just because you saved the deal. You were prepared, you knew exactly what needed to be done. And you stepped up when it mattered most. That's not something everyone can do. Jared felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words, but he still wasn't sure how to respond. Before he could, the elevator doors opened, and they stepped out into the parking garage. Karen walked beside him toward his car, the cool evening air washing over them. She stopped when they reached his vehicle and turned to him with a soft smile. I meant what I said earlier. You saved the deal today, and you've earned a lot of respect from everyone, especially me. Jared felt his face grow warm under her gaze, and for a moment he didn't know what to say. Finally, he managed, I'm just glad I could help. She took a step closer, her eyes locking with his. You did more than that, Jared. You proved something to the company, to the clients, and to yourself. He swallowed, the intensity of the moment catching him off guard. There was something different in her expression now, something deeper than professional gratitude. He could feel it, the subtle shift between them, as if the events of the day had brought them closer in ways neither had anticipated. Before he could process it, Karen leaned in and kissed him soft, tentative, yet filled with unspoken emotion. The world seemed to pause, the steady hum of the garage fading into the background. For Jared, it was a moment of pure clarity, a confirmation that the connection he'd sensed between them had been real all along. When she pulled back, her eyes searched his, as if gauging his reaction. Jared blinked, stunned but not displeased. If anything, it was the most unexpected but welcome twist of the day. I'm sorry if that was Karen began, but Jared quickly cut her off. Don't apologize, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't expect it, but I didn't mind. Karen smiled, a flicker of relief crossing her face. Good, she murmured, because I've wanted to do that for a while now. Jared blinked, taken aback. You have? She nodded, her cheeks flushing slightly. Yes, but I didn't think it was the right time. There was always something in the way. And then today, after everything you did, she trailed off, her eyes softening. I guess I realized I didn't want to wait anymore. Jared's heart swelled, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of hope, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, things were finally falling into place. The fallout from the meeting didn't take long to reach the higher-ups at Goldcraft. Word spread quickly about William's failed attempt to sabotage Karen, and within days it was clear that his career at the company was over. Officially he resigned, but everyone knew it was a forced exit. Jared kept his head down during the storm, though the quiet buzz of vindication hummed through him. He had done the right thing, and the weight of William's oppressive influence was finally lifting. Yet he couldn't help but wonder what came next. Karen, too, seemed to be navigating a new reality. Their shared kiss had left an undeniable mark on their relationship, and while they hadn't spoken about it directly since that night, there was an unspoken understanding between them, something that felt inevitable yet fragile. It wasn't until a week later, when Karen asked Jared to join her for dinner, that the topic resurfaced. They met at a small, intimate restaurant near the office, and as they sat across from each other, Jared couldn't help but feel the shift in the air. This wasn't just a casual dinner between colleagues. So, Karen began, her voice soft but steady, I think we need to talk about what happened between us. Jared nodded, his heart racing. Yeah, I think we do. She smiled gently, her eyes locking with his. I like you, Jared, more than I expected. But I also want to make sure we're both on the same page. If this is something we're going to explore, I don't want it to affect our work. Jared leaned back in his chair, considering her words. He had never imagined that someone like Karen, strong, confident, and successful, would be interested in him. And yet, here they were, standing on the precipice of something more. I feel the same way, Jared admitted, his voice low. But I also don't want to rush anything. I'm not even sure how this will change things between us, if it will change things. Karen nodded thoughtfully. We can take it slow. I don't want to pressure you into anything, Jared. After everything that's happened, you've been through enough. Jared smiled at her concern, grateful for her understanding. Thank you, Karen. That means a lot. They continued their dinner, the conversation flowing easily as they discussed lighter topics: work, life, their shared interests. There was a warmth between them now, a sense of ease that hadn't been there before. Jared couldn't help but feel that this was the start of something new, something good. In the weeks that followed, Jared found himself growing more comfortable in his new role. Karen had recommended him for a promotion, and with William out of the picture, the higher-ups were more than happy to oblige. Jared was now part of the company's legal team, working closely with Karen on major contracts and negotiations. His confidence had grown, too. No longer the quiet, timid man who lurked in the background, Jared began to assert himself, offering his insights during meetings and speaking up when he felt something needed to be said. It was as if stepping out from under William's shadow had freed him in ways he hadn't even realized were possible. His relationship with Karen also blossomed, though they kept it private at work. They spent more time together outside the office, their connection deepening with each passing day. For the first time in his life, Jared felt like he belonged both in his career and in his personal life. But the ghost of William's presence still lingered, casting a shadow over their newfound happiness. Word had reached Jared that William was struggling to find another job. His reputation had taken a hit after his departure from Goldcraft, and companies were wary of hiring someone with a track record of sabotage. It wasn't long before William made a desperate move. He contacted Jared, asking to meet. Against his better judgment, Jared agreed. They met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, and as soon as Jared sat down, he could see the toll the past few months had taken on William. The man who had once towered over him with arrogance now looked haggard, his confidence shattered. "You won," William said, his voice low and bitter. Jared folded his arms, leaning back in his chair. "This wasn't a game, William. You did this to yourself." William scoffed, shaking his head. "Don't play the moral high ground with me, Jared. You think you're better than me because you stepped in at the last minute? Because you saved Karen and the deal?" His eyes darkened, filled with resentment. "I made you. If it weren't for me pushing you down, you wouldn't have had the guts to step up." Jared met William's gaze, his expression calm. "You're wrong, William. I didn't do it because of you. I did it despite you." William sneered but said nothing, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for his coffee cup. "I'm not here to gloat," Jared continued, his tone steady. "I'm here because I want to move on from all of this. What you did, how you treated people, it's over. You need to accept that." For a moment, William looked like he might argue, but then his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Yeah, I guess it is." Jared stood, ready to leave. "Take care of yourself, William." As he walked away from the cafe, Jared felt an overwhelming sense of closure. The chapter with William was finally closed, and he could now focus on what mattered most: his future. With William out of the picture for good, Jared's life took on a new rhythm. His role at Goldcraft grew more fulfilling with each passing day, and his relationship with Karen continued to flourish. They had found a balance between their personal and professional lives, and for the first time in years, Jared felt at peace. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of Karen's apartment, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, Karen turned to him with a smile. "You've come a long way, you know that?" Jared chuckled softly, taking her hand in his. "I have, but I couldn't have done it without you." Karen leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice soft. "I think you would have found your way eventually. You've always had it in you, Jared. You just needed a reason to let it out." Jared smiled, gazing out at the cityscape. "Maybe, but having someone believe in you, that makes all the difference." Karen kissed his cheek, a content sigh escaping her lips. "Well, I'll always believe in you." As they sat in comfortable silence, Jared reflected on how much had changed since that fateful meeting. He had gone from a timid, overlooked employee to a respected member of the company, and he had found love in the most unexpected place. Life had taken twists and turns he never could have predicted, but in the end he had found something that had eluded him for so long: happiness. Months passed, and with them came new challenges and triumphs. Jared and Karen worked together seamlessly, their partnership at Goldcraft stronger than ever. But outside the office, they were planning something far more personal. On a bright spring afternoon in a quiet garden surrounded by friends and family, Jared and Karen exchanged vows. Their journey had been one of unexpected twists, betrayal, and redemption, but through it all, they had found each other. As they stood together, hand in hand, ready to embark on the next chapter of their lives, Jared couldn't help but think back to the man he had been before all of this. Timid, unsure, hiding his potential. That man was gone now, replaced by someone stronger, more confident, a man who had faced his fears and come out the other side. The past was behind him, and the future stretched out before him, filled with endless possibilities. And for the first time in his life, Jared Wilson felt truly free. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, give it a thumbs up, hit the bell, and drop a comment. Your feedback is greatly appreciated.